If you've been interested, or I guess utterly sad enough to have watched some of the other production videos that we've done, you've probably heard me voice a little bit of anxiety in the past about how some of them were going to be received. There's times, I guess, largely when I've been buoyed by the positive feedback that I've seen people come out with, that I'm quite confident about the stuff I've written. Like, they're worth doing, they're worth putting out there. But there's a lot more times when I find myself sat reevaluating the scripts, usually after I've already hit upload, where deep down I just feel like it's not going to land right, it's not going to be received right. And I think for this episode, that nervousness has probably been the greatest. There's a couple of reasons for that, and I'm happy to go through them. It does feel a little bit therapeutic sometimes when I do. And I suppose the most obvious one is that this is the first story that we've done which doesn't really have a villain. Well, not a physical villain anyway. There's no evil Nazi. Well, not that we know of yet. There's no immortal serial killer. There he goes again. There's no ancient monster. The threat or the danger here, it's intangible. It's more of a concept or an idea. And I guess deep down, is that enough? Is that enough of a threat for the story? There's another reason why this one feels different to me. It might feel different to you, in that of all the stories that I've done, it's probably the one that I'm most emotionally invested in. I don't know if it comes across like that. I joined West Midlands Police in 2003, November of 2003, and I served in that force for 15 years before I left. I started out working in Dudley, ended up moving across to Halesowen and West Bromwich, but always worked the western sector of the force. The places that Amos Armitage have worked, those are places I've policed, those buildings, those communities, in some cases, those families. They're parts of my history as much as they are his. And I grew up in Wolverhampton, it's my hometown. Those streets are the ones I used to hang out in, including Red Lion Street. It's not been a police station for some time now, but it is still used as a probation centre at the back of the cells for the magistrates' court in the town, years after the station was relocated to Bilston Street. Like Amos, I was a qualified detective, and at the point I left the force, I was supervising a team. And I also live just down the road, or used to live just down the road from RAF Cosford, which coincidentally is also where the police force used to do its riot training, in an old hangar that the RAF rented out to them there. They wouldn't let me drive straight from my house to riot training, which was really irritating. I had to drive from my house all the way to Dudley to get on a van to come back again. Minor gripe. Forget it. In addition to that, my granddad, Matthew, was a local GP in the area. He had his own practice. He got a little surgery built outside the back of his house. And me and my younger brother used to hang out there when we were kids, when we had a day off school, when our parents were working, when he was seeing people. And watching him work struck me that it was quite a unique position that doctors hold. The whole community would come to him for treatment and advice, regardless of their station or their personal circumstance. My nan would work as his secretary, letting people in, and you had MPs and police officers coming for treatment, along with drunks and shoplifters. You know, everyone got to see a doctor. And I suppose there's a bit of him gone into Dr. Owens, whether it was intentional or not. So in a way, I've given a lot of my past up to this story. And on reflection, maybe perhaps a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. I've only ever written these stories really with me in mind as an audience. I've said this before. My benchmark is, if it's entertaining and scary to me, then I run with it. So I guess if this one doesn't land right, if there's a bit of pushback on it, or if this is a clunker, then that blending of a a military background and a police background, an army adventure with a police investigation, if it doesn't land right, then I've dropped the ball on it a little bit. In terms of inspiration, when I actually read back over the script after I'd finished it, I think it was quite easy to say, "Oh, look, this is just Terminator, but in World War II, isn't it? You've got people being sent back in time from the future to try and prevent something that will change the past, an assassination. You've got future soldiers materialising out of thin air. He's just done Terminator in World War II, hasn't he?" God's honest truth, when I wrote it, that's not where my head was. It was somewhere very different, in a reference that will probably age me to the audience. And it was Time Cop, the Jean-Claude Van Damme classic that is Time Cop, and the awful sequel and TV show that came out after that. That idea being that there's no killer robots in the future, but time travel's a mess. It's so much of a mess that it's kept under control, under wraps, and the only time the government get involved is when someone breaches it. So if someone escapes back in time with the intention of killing Hitler and somehow improving the end of the war for Germany, then the UK armed forces are going to have to send someone back to try and stop them. And it's at this point, I guess, that the dual arguments about time travel come to mind. Can you, A, actually go back in time and change an act, kill somebody, and watch the effects ripple out? Or B, if you go to do that, has it already happened? Are you the ripple? Has that death already succeeded or failed? And it doesn't matter what you do when you go back because it's already been done. There is an end to this story, which is already mapped out, ready to go, and it will reveal which side of that argument I've pinned my flag to. The other issue, after choosing that side of the argument, was to try and come up with a convincing methodology. The fact that the plot, the police investigation side of it, hinged on the failed attempts to get people back alive, pointed me towards the fact that the tech had to be quite rough and ready, quite rudimentary. There's a device, it's grafted into the soldiers. It clearly works in terms of getting them back time-wise, but their locations they arrive in, there's no knowledge or understanding of what was there 100 years ago from the people working the future. They get altitudes wrong. People appear underground or up in the middle of the air. And that's why people keep dying. But then after that, how do they get a message back to themselves in the future? How do they let themselves know it's failed? And that's where the UV tattoos came in. Whoever's investigating in the past, in this case, Armitage, they write their reports, they log it. 100 years in the future, the people sending the soldiers back realise it and realise that an attempt failed. But they have to keep going because that's part of their history. So they're sat in their office reading these reports which show X number of soldiers have to die before the operation's successful. So they still send people back to their deaths, knowing that you've got to have 4 deaths before the 5th is successful, which is pretty horrible. I did do some interesting research to try and make it all work, like when did Ordnance Survey grid reference maps come in? Were they around in World War II? Also, did they have black lights in World War II? What did they use them for? How did that fit into spycraft at the time with the iodine and the lemon juice? It's a bit of a rabbit warren, let me tell you. It's easy to get pulled down there. You've probably noticed that things have been a bit slower of late. You'll be aware by now, and it's been going 4 or 5 weeks, that Bedtime Stories has now teamed up with Mr. Borland, and they're bringing the Bedtime Stories podcast back under the Borland Studios banner. That has meant some more script work needing doing around the YouTube channel and the podcast. Alongside that, I'm also studying for a promotion exam in relation to my work, which is coming in November. So I've had to cut right back on spare time, hence there's not as many videos going out. End of November, I should be back up and running again. I'm hankering after a bit of an idea of redoing Mendacious. Yeah, I know I've redone it once already, but the last 2 or 3 years, my audio has got better. There's more music, use of animation, and I think I can tweak the script a little bit as well. So if that's something you'd like to see, let me know. And if you think it's just a waste of time, also let me know. Because if that's the case, I won't bother doing it. Anyway, as always, would love to hear your feedback on this one, positive or negative. That's how we learn. And hope to see you guys again soon. Goodbye.